Good.
And we're live.
Okay. Welcome to the June 26, 2025 meeting of the Finance and Facilities Committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. The meeting is being held in person with committee members participating remotely. At this time, Board Secretary Michelle Carreri will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present via WebEx or present in person when your name is called.
Fahid Onjazieri, Armand Sabatoni,
Present via WebEx.
Maria Ducharme,
Present via WebEx.
Mike Fascitelli,
Present via WebEx.
Joe Formicola,
Present via WebEx.
Courtney Nicolato,
Present via WebEx.
Christine Bovey,
Present via WebEx.
Mark Parlange.
Present via WebEx.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we're ready to do business. Reminder to all members for the benefit of our audience and the note taker, please clearly identify yourself whenever you comment. Make a motion or second a motion. Participants using WebEx are required to keep their cameras on, as remote members and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible and visible to each other. At this time, I will acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and Niantic people. Michelle, anything extra proposed, any extra proposed amendments?
No, I just wanted to state though, Chair Margot Cook has joined the meeting.
All right, hi
Thank
Margot.
you.
Okay, no additional amendments. We'll get right into it. First order of business is approval of the minutes of April 17, 2025. Do I hear that as a motion to approve?
Yes. So make motion to approve the minutes, Harmon, for Mike.
Okay, and I heard a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. All in favor say yes.
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 No. We have none. No abstentions. None. Okay, motion passes. Okay, next order of business, we will review several items. Review of the university debt, comprehensive campus plan update, approvals under the delegation of authority to the president relating to land and property, Global Spectrum LP doing business as Oakview Group, Amendment 2, Ryan Center, Boss Arena Management. So we'll start with the first one, review of the university debt. Abby, you ready?
I am.
Okay, let's hear it.
So as was mentioned, we have quite a few things to cover today, and I think you all received some extensive slide decks before the meeting. So I'm going to try to go through this one pretty quickly, but of course want to make sure we have time for questions. So this is an annual update on the university's debt portfolio. We started doing this last year in the April meeting, and we didn't have data from Moody's and our peers in time to do it in the April meeting, so we postponed it till this meeting. But essentially our goal is to give you an overview of our debt and talk to you a little bit about our rating process. So next slide, please. Just as a reminder, URI has access to two types of bonds. The first are general obligation bonds, which are issued by the state, and the debt service is paid by the state, which we're very fortunate to have. The second type of bond is a revenue bond that is issued by URI through Rybeck, and the debt service is paid through us. And we have two types of those bonds. We have auxiliary bonds that are secured by auxiliary revenue, which is housing and dining and other, and then education and general bonds, which are secured by our general revenue, which includes tuition, state appropriation, et cetera. So this is just a summary of our bonds. You can see at the top, we have about 223 million of total direct debt outstanding at this time. Next slide, please. This is just another way to sort of look at our debt. So on the top, you just see our debt service over a time series. There's principal and interest in the two different colors of blue. On the bottom, you see our debt service by lien, so by education in general and by auxiliary. And then on the bottom right, you see debt service by series. So that indicates at which date each of these bonds were issued. So, what I'll point out here is that we do have kind of a maximum debt payment looking in the next kind of 28, 29, 20, 28, 28, 29, 30 time period. But then after that, we do see a fall off. So I think there are some opportunities for us. And we know we have lots of projects in the hopper to say that we will be looking to borrow for in the future to maybe even out that debt service as our overall budget allows. Next slide. So one opportunity we do have is that a significant amount of our debt is callable in 2027 and 2028. So we could potentially refund bonds if the market is favorable. I say that because the market is obviously a bit volatile at the moment, but that's something we'll certainly be considering as we're looking to take on additional debt to fund some of our future projects. Next slide, please. So this, I thought, for this year, I would just give a little bit of a deeper dive into the rating agency process. So you probably have heard that all three of the rating agencies have expressed concern about the higher education sector, and Moody's actually recently revised its outlook to negative for the entire higher education sector. You can see here in red some of the things they're concerned about. Obviously, federal policy changes are of great concern, macroeconomic uncertainty, and market volatility. So this is just a general sense. It doesn't mean that everyone will get downgraded. It just means that the look on the rate from the rating agencies isn't particularly rosy at this point in time. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of our credit overview. So we do get our ratings affirmed by S&P and by Moody's. We did go through the process in December of 2024 with S&P and May of 2023 by Moody's, although we're in the middle of that process right now. So we just had our meeting with them a few weeks ago. And this is just a summary of our ratings. I would say, we have definitely some positive attributes in terms of being the flagship land and sea grant university. As the board knows, we've had strong interest in applications and strong enrollment. I think some concerns are just the overall higher education sector volatility that I mentioned earlier. And, we have sort of lower cash than some of our peers, although we're in a stable position, but relative to some of our peers. So this is just a summary of where the agencies think we are. We do put a lot of emphasis on our engagement with the agencies because we know it's so important to support our future borrowing. Okay, so the next few slides just go into more detail on the factors that Moody's, and this is particularly Moody's, that they consider when they're looking at our rating. So this is more just for educational, informational purposes. So they look at scale. So they do have a size bias where, bigger is better generally if you have more operating revenues. So we're, you can see our adjusted operating revenues according to our financial statements are about 656 million. So that's a range. We get a certain score based on that. Next slide, please. This one is highly subjective market profile. So, what's our brand and strategic positioning? What's our operating environment? So, for example, in our last discussion with Moody's, we talked a lot about the #1 research university in Wall Street Journal. We talked a lot about being in R1 and our largest gift in our history, those kind of things. I think the agencies really pay attention to what's going on at a university. Again, it's subjective, but you can see they view us as higher than average in this factor.
Hey, Abby.
Yeah. I can't see who that is, but
It's
Margot.
It's
yes.
Margot. Sorry. Hi. What is is there some relationship between the size of the endowment and revenues? Or is there context on how to think about the size of the endowment relative to a rating?
Yeah, so you'll see that actually in a few slides. There is a factor that looks at that. They look at basically our cash and they count the university's cash, but they also count the size of the endowment and the foundation. So we'll get to that in a couple of slides.
Okay. I'll wait.
All right, next slide. So operating performance, this is really our operating margin essentially. So taking into account our operating margin, but then they add back in depreciation, amortization. And so this is just a measure of kind of profitability of an organization. So I would say we're average according, and Moody says we're average according to the rating that we have. I think the next slide goes into, yeah, so here we go. Financial resources and liquidity. So this is something they care about. You can see they view us as slightly below average. So this total cash and investments does include our cash that the university holds, but also cash that the foundation holds. Moody's actually used to not consider the foundation, and Abby Ryder really made a big effort to indicate really that the foundation investments should be counted as URI investments. So that was very helpful in this process. And then if you can look, there is a ratio, total cash and investments over operating expenses. So if you look at that red bullet here, you know, I think that we are okay here, but this is an area that we need to grow to continue to have a stronger rating score here. And I think we grow it by growing our cash and investments, and we grow it by reducing our expenses if possible. Leverage and coverage. So this is essentially our cash to debt ratio. We have ratios that we have to abide by on the E&G side and the auxiliary side to make sure that we have enough cash essentially to pay our debt service. So in here, we're better than average, which is helpful. And our adjusted debt is essentially our debt that we have, as it was outlined in the beginning, our overall debt for all of our bonds, but they also count kind of OPEB and retirement related debts here. So again, we're but slightly better than average on this metric. Next slide. This is called market profile, but I think it was an error when I was looking at this morning. It should be financial policies and strategy. So this is another metric that really is subjective, but it's basically how well do you think the university is being run? And so again, this is where we spend a lot of time trying to be very transparent with our rating agencies about the leadership of the university, the governance of the university, and financial practices and policies. So they view us here as excellent. Okay.
This is Amin. When they talk about the net pensions, are they looking at the state pension fund? Yeah, that's
They
gonna,
do. Yeah.
based on the, yeah, that's gonna hurt us, doesn't it?
Yeah, they have expressed some concerns around the sort of state of the state pension funds as something to kind of keep an eye on. Obviously, that's something we look at, but they do pay attention to the overall health of the pension fund.
All right.
So finally, if you look here, this is just a summary of Moody's scorecard indicators, and you can see where we are is that red box, which is really where a lot of public universities are. So this 1 through 3 is really the most popular rating for public universities, and we fall in that. So again, this is meant to be more educational, and if you go to the appendix, I did include a lot of peer comparison slides. I walked through those last year, and you have them there if you have any questions, but I know we have a lot to cover in this meeting, so I wasn't going to walk through them. I did want to share a couple of initiatives, however, on the Treasury front, which I believe are on the next slide. I was really pleased to have support from the president to hire a director of Treasury, which is a new position at URI. We actually haven't had that position in the past. So we hired this person who just started a few months ago and comes from a private university and really has just sort of dug in, looking at our compliance and risk, obviously. So one of the things I've charged him with, and our controller, AVP Angela Miller, is making sure that we are very buttoned up on our tax compliance. As many of you know, we recently had an IRS audit on one of our bonds that was issued in 2018. Also, just ensuring that we have policy and governance in place around Treasury. We are a component unit of the state, so we have to abide by the state's policies, but we have some more flexibility than I think we have previously thought around sort of how we're managing the cash that we do have. So we're trying to look at opportunities to maximize earnings in a way that is obviously within our risk profile, but helps bring in some more income to the university for the cash that we do have. And finally, some more reporting and transparency. So these are things I'm really going to be focused on in FY26 now that we have that new position here. And I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some more returns for the university on the cash that we're holding. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the slides. As I mentioned, they're in the appendix. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this, but I do intend for this to be an annual update to the board. So you know how things are going with our rating agencies and our debt portfolio.
Okay, any questions? Okay, you can move on to the comprehensive campus plan update.
Okay, so this is another deck that has a lot of slides. Let me give you some, I believe that Michelle, if your team is sharing it. If not, I have, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So again, this is about 40 slides. I'm not going to go through all of these slides, but I did want to touch on some highlights. So as the board knows, and this committee knows, we've been working with Sasaki, which is a internationally recognized firm, to work on our comprehensive campus plan for the last year. They have been meeting on campus with stakeholders. They've been talking to the leadership of the university, talking to students, talking to faculty and staff. They've come to the campus several times and really trying to think through what the future of our campus might look like. Tyler Patrick, who is our principal for Sasaki, was not able to be here today. He will be here virtually for the board meeting tomorrow, but we do have Andrew Gutterman here from Sasaki to answer any questions you might have from their perspective. But I'm going to walk through the deck just to give you some highlights of where things are. Our intention is to bring this to the board for approval in September. So you're getting it, we're kind of at the final data gathering scenario analysis, and then we'll be spending the summer actually writing the plan and getting a lot of the details behind the plan. And that's what we'll bring to you in September for approval. So as a reminder, if you go to the next slide, this comprehensive campus plan is really intended to be a physical manifestation of our strategic plan. So everything we've done has been guided by the strategic plan. And the next slide outlines how Sasaki has actually mapped the strategic plan priorities to the comprehensive planning principles that they've used throughout this process. If you go to the next slide, there are a few slides here that just summarize big ideas and things that Sasaki is focused on in the process. So one is, how are we making sure that our campuses are connected, that there's cross-programming opportunities. Obviously, a big focus has been the Kingston campus and the Bay campus, which previously had a master plan done. But also, you know, how are we making sure that there are opportunities for connection with our current outreach and research programs in Providence that are mostly in the Shepherd building. We also have some education efforts in Providence and Rhinebeck, particularly around nursing. And then the Sasaki didn't focus as much on the W. Alton Jones campus, and I know we're going to talk about that later in the agenda, so that may become a little more evident why. But, you know, how are we making sure that we're a Rhode Island university that has connections between all the campuses? Next slide, please. So one focus has been pedestrian connections and wayfinding. This is really important, especially we have this campus that has a pretty significant topography from kind of the west side of campus to the east side of campus. So really focused on how are we making sure that the campus is more accessible and people can get around the campus from a mobility standpoint more easily. The next big idea that the campus focused on really is around wellness and being an active campus. So you'll see here that there's a real effort to revitalize kind of the greenway down between the athletics and the residential neighborhoods, and also to really bring the North Woods into the comprehensive campus plan in a way that it's used, but not as deliberately and inviting to the campus community. And also these areas in pink are really student life, athletics. So how are we making sure that we have enough amenities for students to prioritize wellness and an active lifestyle? Going to the next slide is really distributing housing. So, you know, I think one thing that's been challenging is that we do have a pretty striated neighborhood approach where we have kind of athletics, and then we have a housing neighborhood, and then we have academic kind of up the hill. So if you look here, the central yellow, kind of mustard yellow buildings are our current housing. And then you look at future housing with the arrows. So as many of you know, we have this P3 ongoing that's going to build 2 new residence halls on the north side of our campus. But then there are also opportunities on the south side to maybe build some more housing in the future where some current parking lots are, and also up in the fine arts parking lot. So how are we making sure, it's nice to have that neighborhood, but how are we making sure that there are other vibrant housing areas in the long term on the campus? Next slide. So this slide is really about how are we engaging the Kingston community. So it's really focused on this upper campus road area. So we've done a lot of work here already with the Welcome Center and the alumni and foundation buildings that are really beautiful. And the Fine Arts Center, as you know, is underway. We are actively working on a development of a hotel and a mixed-use site, and then thinking that that fine arts parking lot could be an opportunity for long-term residential and mixed-use development. There's obviously a lot of private land where it says marketplace here that certainly URI has kind of interest in, and is always looking at ways that we can interact with those private property owners to the benefit of URI and the community. But that is the entrance for most people to the campus. So we really want to make sure that that's vibrant and connected to Kingston.
Hey, Abby, it's Margot.
Yeah.
Are there, is there improvement needed, like around pedestrian paths and bike paths and like easy ways, like that are not car dominated to
Absolutely.
get, you know, around the campus?
Yeah, and that was sort of the first big idea around pedestrian connectivity and better wayfinding. So we actually have a transportation master plan that was done, I think, in 2018 that really was recommended pushing as much parking as possible to the outside of campus. And you'll see in a future slide that we're also recommending a current road that allows cars actually become a pedestrian throughway, and a big greenway connecting the campus from east to west. So the goal of that really is to make it more inviting to walk around the campus and to make it easier for our community to get from where they need to be in an accessible way, but also a more clear way. So
Good.
that's definitely been a big focus. Another big idea is about integrating environmental stewardship. Part of that is making sure that we're keeping our wooded lands wooded, and making sure that we're keeping to that land grant. The nature of our university, but also what are we doing for energy? We're undergoing an energy master plan. So the company we've been using for that master plan, which is really focused on decarbonizing the campus, also was a sub to Sasaki for the energy part of the comprehensive campus plan. So the plan will go into great detail about what the options could be around decarbonization for the campus, around different power opportunities and different neighborhoods. So that's definitely been a big piece of the effort, is looking at our utilities. And then finally, I think the next big idea is around the Bay campus. So as I mentioned, the Bay campus already had a master plan. And as you all know, the state has really invested heavily there. So we built on that. But one thing we did do, and I'll show a detailed slide later, is actually did a survey of the entire Bay campus to understand what parts of it are developable and what areas could be used for future expansion. So the blue economy is a focus of our strategic plan and URI's focus, and how are we maximizing the Bay campus to meet those needs. So those are just a summary of kind of the big ideas. I'm going to go through quickly just so you can see some really nice graphics that kind of talk about how these big ideas are being manifested in the plan. So if you go to the next slide, let's go to the next slide. So the next slide gives you a visual with colors look at the proposed frameworks for the long-term potential for new development on the campus. The different colors, as you see in the legend down below, are different types of buildings. The lighter buildings are existing, and the lighter colors are existing, and the darker colors are proposed new. So there's a lot of infill of the campus that's proposed to maximize increasing our square footage, both for academic and research buildings, for housing, student life. We are going to have to take a lot of buildings down. Some might not be worth, especially in the housing area, as we briefed the committee before on with the Housing and Residential Life Master Plan. So we're going to take some square footage off, but then where are we able to maximize new square footage? So if you look here, it's a total going from our kind of existing square footage of 5.35 million up to 8.28 million, but that includes taking some off and adding some new. So this is really the long-term view of where, as we're thinking about our 5-year capital improvement plan, where are we investing? What buildings do we want to build to meet the needs of our strategic plan? There are a couple of slides here that I think show a great sort of different view on this. So this is more of a 3D view on our central and residential district. So one thing I'll point out here, if you see where it says Butterfield Road, many of you know Butterfield Road. Right now, that cars are allowed on that road. We're actually proposing that that turn into a pedestrian-only road, obviously with access for emergency vehicles. But it's a really heavily trafficked area. And I think kind of to Margot's question earlier, that gives a really nice kind of walkway and central gathering space for the campus. And this also shows some of our new proposed buildings like the Health and Counseling Center, obviously the Memorial Union that we're hoping to renovate soon, and some of our new potential expansion for housing and recreational buildings. So the next slide shows a view of Butterfield, what this would look like. So there are lots of different opportunities for materials that we can consider for this, but really just making it a central gathering space that's safer for our community. So the next slide shows the North Academic District. So we already have the Integrated Health Building. Number 2 is our bond that is on our CIP that you'll also be reviewing later today. We also have, some opportunity to build additional health-related buildings along this northern edge of campus. The Biomedical Sciences Building is the bond that was just approved. But then if you look at number 3, number 4, those are really opportunities in the future if we want to kind of continue to build that neighborhood. Next slide. The historic, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just said, let's do it.
Yeah. Again, the whole point of this is to have a plan so that when we're doing our 5-year capital improvement plan, we're able to prioritize what we want to do next. So the historic quad district, so you'll see here, and there's a slide later that shows really an attempt to kind of connect the historic quad to the Carruthers Library quad and then all the way down to the athletics area. That's been a focus of Sasaki to make that kind of a central greenway that's more accessible to get to do the east and west from on the campus. I do want to point out number 4 here is the Student Success Center. That's on the SIP proposed as our 2028 bond, which would replace Carlotti, which is currently an administrative building. And you'll see number 2 is the hotel mixed-use development that we're thinking about on Upper College Road. Okay, landscape and stormwater management. The thing I want to highlight here is, if we keep going, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so if you see here, that's that greenway I was talking about. It really focuses on connecting the quads, but also really renovating Ellery Pond and having Ellery Pond be a gathering space for the community and making an accessible pathway from the east to the west side of campus. The next slide shows this really well in terms of what this could look like. Some opportunities at other campuses and a little more detail. So you see these sort of zigzag paths. They allow for accessibility and they also allow for gathering for our campus and really just making Ellery Pond a gathering point, a central point right now. It's not used that way really at all. Okay, we'll keep going. I think there's just a few more. So the North Woods trails, as I mentioned earlier, really want to maximize the North Woods for trails, for hiking, walking, potentially cross-country racing. So again, people do use the North Wood trails for education and research, but it's not, we haven't really focused on developing it in a way with wayfinding, etc. Next slide, there's just some pictures of what that could look like. We'll keep going to, this is a beautiful visual, I think, of that kind of looking from up right below Roosevelt down to Ellery Pond. So that's that zigzaggy pathway for accessibility and a gathering space, really opening that up. That doesn't exist now. When I saw this graphic, it just got me very excited about the future for that on the campus. Next slide. I spoke about Ellery Pond, but here are some options. Right now, there's, chain link fence in areas, but here are some options to actually make the pond more accessible. These are what's been done at some other campuses and really bring out the pond and the whole waterway area.
This would be so, just so amazing. Right now, it's almost like a negative that we have that, like, it serves no purpose, and it could go from a space that nobody cares about to this gorgeous space.
Yeah, I agree. And I know Andrew from Sasaki is on, and That's his area, so I'm sure he's had a lot to do with this. But this also, I think, gets everyone really excited. It also just ties into the nature of our campus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go to the Bay campus.
Before you jump, so on that
Yeah.
section, the 2.3 section, my thing just jumped. From that landscaping point on,
Yeah,
did
can go
did
back
I
to
miss
that.
it, or do we have a projected amount to do from landscaping on? The landscape and stormwater management, do we have a projected
I-
figure?
Are you asking about a dollar amount or
Yeah.
projected?
Yeah, dollar amount.
Yeah, so go back. Here's,
Was that on
this
the
is a
original?
summary. We'll have some more information on that. I don't know if Andrew wants to speak to that, but we'll have more information about it in the plan. I just kind of skipped over it here because I know we don't have a lot of time, but certainly the approach to landscaping is not just in that area, but really it's being considered throughout the entire campus.
That 2018 bond that we had, did we already utilize all the rest of that money?
Yes.
That's gone. All right.
Yeah, but we do have contemplated, in the past, we've done what we've called parking and paving bonds. So that's not necessarily landscaping, but it is related to landscaping. I think we could consider a bond to effectuate some of the recommendations in the plan. But we'll have a better sense of the order of magnitude of what's needed to carry out the plan by September when we get all the details behind the graphics.
All right.
So I'd like to go to the last slide, which is on the Bay campus. So if we could just go all the way to the last slide in the interest of time. Oh, not the next one.
Opportunity sites?
Yeah, opportunity sites, that one. There's one more. That one. Okay. So looking at this, what we did, as I mentioned earlier, is we surveyed the entire campus because there are quite a bit of wetlands on the campus. While we own a lot of land there, some of it is not developable, but there is a significant amount that is. Most of the buildings that are labeled here already exist or are new buildings. For example, our Ocean Engineering Complex, our Ocean Frontiers building, the pier that is already done. There's a jetty there. We do have a feasibility study looking at if there's an opportunity to change the water type and consider building a jetty there to allow for small boat access, which I think would be of great interest to the sailing team and to getting more of our community on the water. We're really just trying to look right now if that's feasible. We don't have a funding source identified, but that would obviously really change the nature of the whole campus and allow for more accessibility, because right now it's great for a ship, but it's actually quite dangerous to get small boats in and out because of the currents. So that is an exciting opportunity, a longer term opportunity. But then if you look kind of heading west, there is quite a bit of land for expansion opportunity. And that could be things like housing, it could be a conference center, it could be more research buildings. But our goal really here, because there has been such an investment in this campus, was just to really understand kind of the footprint of what's possible. And I personally think this could be a great opportunity for some public-private partnerships as we're thinking about taking advantage of this really unique campus.
Abby, I was thinking about that too. And I don't know if this is feasible, but this would be an amazing place for like a commercial space that we share revenue in, like even like an outdoor concert venue space, or like something that takes advantage of the spot that it's in, but also could be a revenue producer.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a good point, and there's developers that are interested in that. By the way, is this type 1 water with our dock is, or type 2?
I believe it's type 1. Ryan, maybe you want to, is it?
This is Catherine. Can I just add it's type 2?
Yeah,
And-
type
and
2. We want it to be type 1, right?
And we're not asking for a special, we're not going to, just one correction, we're going to be asking for a special exception.
We're actually asking for type 1?
No, we're asking for a special
No.
exception. So
Yeah,
Abby's
'cause
correct.
Type 2, you
Originally,
could do more.
Originally, we were asking to change the water type. After initial conversations with the CRMC, we were strongly advised to not request a changing of the water type, but rather to ask for a special exception for the greater good of the state. So our predetermination application is in for that.
All right, but it's
Thanks,
type 2 to
Catherine.
start with.
Type 2.
Well, that gives us more opportunity, type 2. Type 1 is so restrictive. By the way, these things go back to 1940s, 1930s. Some of these regulations, if you ask them at CRMC how they can't even tell you. Can you tell us? No.
The history of it?
No,
I
yeah.
wouldn't try.
I missed the name of the woman speaking.
Oh, Catherine. Catherine is one of our architects, and she's done an amazing job shepherding this feasibility
But I'm not
project
going to try
through
to
with a number
justify
of
the CMC.
faculty. Yeah.
All right, no rhyme or rhythm at this point. Thank God you don't have a house there, because it'd be in the ocean. They can't do a thing about it.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to walk through on the comprehensive campus plan. Again, we'll come back for approval in September. As usual, always welcome your feedback. So we have a lot of data and I think a lot of good ideas here, but feedback from the board is welcome at any time. At any time over the next few months as we're really trying to finalize the plan is helpful. So
Abby, got one just quick question. When I'm on the opportunity site of the Bay campus and I get to the end of the green where the wetlands are, how far back from where the actual buildings of the campus are have we gone in this diagram to Boston Neck Road? Because I know we own a lot of land almost up there. Or is this just a very short, small area of a footprint of what we own?
this is most of what we own in that area. Ryan, I heard
Yeah.
Ryan jump in.
Yep, so
but-
this does show 95% of what we own.
Yeah.
To the east, you're going to go another almost half of what we show here to get to Boston Neck Road.
Okay. All right.
And then
That's
you can
pretty
see
good.
Bonnet Shores to the south where the housing is
Yep.
much more
We
densely.
do have some other parcels in South Kingstown and in Narragansett, but in terms of kind of contiguous, this is mostly it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the comprehensive plan? Okay,
had
Abby, you're gonna talk
question.
about,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Chris Bobby, sorry. So
Hi,
it
Chris.
was super fun to look at all these drawings and really enjoyed it. And I love the idea for the North Woods. And then I was telling a colleague like, oh, they're, thinking of a cross-country trail in North Woods. And her first response was, oh, that's a super fun site. So, I mean, I know you're obviously aware of that. And I just wondered that I don't know, if you had any thoughts on like how you message that or what the update is on that, and I know that might be a big question, but like.
Yeah, so we do have a super fun site. It's not in the North Woods, it's adjacent and it's something
To the west, is that?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And it's something we monitor and manage. It's been there for quite a while. So I think it's good feedback to consider if that's the thinking out there, like, oh, you're gonna spend more time in North Woods.
She said I'd never go in that woods or whatever.
Yeah. So that's helpful feedback. We can think about that as we're considering further. I don't want to call it development of the North Woods. I want to call it access to the North Woods.
Yeah. Awesome. And the other question I just had was, love to sometime hear if there's any updates on the Watson House and what's going to happen with that. But we don't need to get into that now, but any kind of historic preservation angle for the campus plan.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you an update on the Watson House. We have been working through some updates to the building.
Awesome.
So.
I see there's some caution tape around it. Thank you.
I have a couple of suggestions.
Yes.
For Margot and Mark, I really want to have focus on this too for the board. But I think we've needed this for a long time. But I think one of the things that we've got to do when we get this plan, we all agree, I think it's going to be very good, is we need to start prioritizing how we would develop this plan over time, what the timing is, get some cost estimates, and then prioritization, like, Mark, if you want to do the pond, the walkway opportunities for, raising money around certain projects and naming opportunities. It just has to be a pretty just to take this plan. I don't think will be as useful if we don't follow up with the next steps, which is to really prioritize what we can do over time to put some dollar signs to it, fundraising opportunities to it, timetables to it. Because I think this is going to give us a good directional plan, but we can't bite off everything in this plan. Like, and we know, housing is a priority. We know that the two there, which was the third place, was a priority. We already want to go to wayfinding and navigation was a priority, but we need to, I think not only does the board have to approve this plan, I think we need to get some substantive dates, timing, money behind each of these initiatives so we can really prioritize and go with some kind of like 4 or
And
5 year plan.
And we will have a good bit of that. The plan will include some initial estimates of
Right.
dollar amounts for each of the buildings that are proposed. But I agree with you, Mike. We clearly need to, once the plan is finished, we need to think about how we're going to space it out and what we're going to prioritize.
Well,
And that's that capital
buildings
improvement
or
plan.
wayfinding, lighting, the pond, these are buildings, but I'm saying each of these discrete items should be prioritized and should have a number to them, I think. So, because I think that's the only way, practically, that's what we need to do once we get this done. I think this is a very valuable tool to have. I've been in favor. I think it's coming along well, as you know. We've looked at this in the other committee, but I think we need to make sure we finish that and close that loop at the end. Margaret, I think that's part of the board review too. I don't know if you agree or Mark agree, but that's what I see how we get the most out of this.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mike. And I think you raised another point. Very, very close coordination with Mark Antonucci and the foundation, because a lot of these things are potentially funded by donation or partnerships or
Right.
naming opportunities, all that stuff. I think that has to be a really important part of the plan.
Yeah, maybe just to jump in, Mike, to your first point. First of all, I think now what Abby is presenting and the work is very aspirational for the university. I think it is actually quite inspiring. If I think they've come a long way since the last Board of Trustees meeting to present really beautification of the campus that attracts people to want to be here. And so that's really an important step. But I think your point is well taken, that we have to think about how this is going to map out, and a bit of a timeline, because not everything can be done at once. Obviously, some things can be done together, but it's yeah.
Ryan's our Director of Planning and Real Estate Development. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about the next steps we already have planned as we get this plan finalized.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. Mike, yeah, we do actually have already working with a cost estimator. We've gone through the first version. We're looking at the second version to update that data for the cost. We want to make sure, one thing that's been highlighted and utmost importance is that at the end of this process, we want an actionable plan. We don't want just a pretty image that sits on a shelf or sits on a wall and says, we point to. So not only are we looking at the costs associated with each individual project, but we're also looking at how we have to sequence and the logistics of how are we going to serve these buildings from a utilities point of view, looking at the infrastructure that we have, making sure that it aligns and that we're doing it in a way that's thoughtful and cognizant to be efficient with our resources. So that's part of the next step. Catherine and I and another architect in the office, Steve Leonard, will be going up to Sasaki's office on Monday to really get into the nitty gritty and go into detail about the sequencing and a lot of the details. So we're working through those steps now, and we will come back to the board with all of that information that gets into how do we actually affect change rather than just have the aspirational images ahead of us.
Yeah, and another thing is, go ahead, Mike.
No, and prioritize. To Mark's point, if we look at the dorm situation, right? If we think we get better dorms, we're going to get better enrollment, which is an economic benefit and return on that. You know what I'm saying? Some of these are going to have very measurable returns. Some are going to be more longer term, judgmental returns. So we need to really focus on prioritization and what benefits we get besides just making it prettier, right? I mean, we really have to look. Some things really stand out to be, I think, a fairly high return on our investment quickly.
Yeah, another point is having that detail. So when we go through the capital improvement plan, we also show high level numbers and a lot of pretty pictures, but there's a lot of detail that goes into the CIP. So the state is also interested in us having this, and it will help us have, you know, we'll have the initial estimates that will help us drive more advanced planning studies that will give us real numbers to give the state, because everything we put on that SIP needs to be justified. So I think this will also help us as we make presentations for our CIP. So really appreciate the feedback, and I just want to thank the planning team and our Sasaki colleagues for all their work on this.
Okay, very good. You want to go over the delegation of authority to the president relating to land and property? That's the item C.
Great. Yeah, so this is our standard update on actions taken since the last meeting. In this case, we only had one action that was taken under the president's delegation, which was to basically enter into a real estate agreement and our consent to a mortgage for one of our fraternity houses on the campus. So as many of you know, those are operated under a ground lease to the campus, so we don't own the buildings. So we do have opportunity to weigh in and approve when they change their mortgage, who they have their mortgage with. So that's the only action that took place since the last meeting.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, the last discussion on D, the Global Spectrum LPL doing business as Oakview Group.
Yeah, so this is just a notification to the board that we do intend to enter into a second and final renewal with the Oakview Group, who manages the Ryan Center and Boss Arena on our behalf. We first entered into a contract with Oakview Group back in 2017. We entered into a first renewal in 2020, and this will be the last renewal from 2025 to 2030. And although the total value of the contract is not over 5 million, we did want to share the notification with the board as it is a strategic contract. So essentially with this renewal, the terms essentially stay the same as the last. We are trying to tighten up some of the legal definitions in the agreement as outlined in the memo that you received, mostly to make sure that the safe harbor provision around private business use is still intact. So Oakview Group has a safe harbor designation as a management company, meaning even though we finance the building using gifts and tax exempt bonds, there's a limitation for private use. So we have that safe harbor provision. So we tried to tighten up some of the legal language just to make sure it was clear. And we did work with them on adjusting the incentive funding slightly. So they get a fixed management fee, and then they get incentive funding based on revenues that they bring into the facility. We did allow alcohol to be served in recent years, which has increased the revenue coming in, but that was certainly something that we allowed. And so we've worked with them to make sure that they're not getting all of the benefit of the additional revenue coming in via alcohol. So we did work with them on negotiating that down. And they are contributing to an event marketing fund that helps the Oakview Group try to get URI, try to get acts and other non-URI events at both the Ryan Center and Boss Arena. So we are in the final stages of reviewing and negotiating that amendment or renewal, and we hope to have it done by July 1. So in the next few days. Happy to answer any questions you might have. We do anticipate we'll likely go out for an RFP at the end of this renewal, as would be required under state procurement rules. So.
Abby,
Okay.
this is Courtney. I'm curious. I mean, the Ryan Center, I saw the budget, the operating budget for 26 shows a $1.5 million deficit. Curious as to what that's looked like over the course of the last 3 to 5 years, and if so, what we're trying to do to shift
Yeah,
that.
Courtney, it's a great question. So you are right. There is an operating budget deficit. Part of that, COVID, we had some challenges during COVID where we lost opportunity. The bigger challenge in my mind is that we didn't necessarily do the required kind of repairs and maintenance at the Ryan Center. So I think it was put off and put off. And now we really just have to do some of those things. So it's really eaten into our annual revenue. We did have a fund balance. We've been using that fund balance to do that repairs and maintenance. I've recently brought together a group of kind of an ad hoc committee at the university, Ellen Reynolds, marketing communication, Dean Labuti from enrollment and management and our director of athletics to sort of help be thought partners about the future of the Ryan Center and Boss Arena, because there are challenges where a lot of these arenas don't operate positively, but we're challenged in that we're close to Providence, we're close to Foxwoods, we're close to other venues. We don't have that hotel and restaurant that people can come and have dinner and go to an event. I think there are a number of reasons why we're challenged. However, it's a beautiful facility, as you know, and I think the Oakview Group actually has done really an amazing job sort of keeping it running, keeping it in great shape, which is, I think they're a trusted partner, which is why we're comfortable with this renewal. But we're trying to work with them to bring in more revenue, reduce expenses, focus on the critical repair and maintenance. And it's going to be a focus of mine for the next few years because we can't continue.
Yeah. It's helpful. I think that's why the Boss does so well, is that you have an incredible demand.
Yeah.
It's hot. There's no ice in this area. And so
Correct.
you've got 5 or 6 high school teams that are using Boss as their home base. So
yeah. And Boss actually, financially, Boss does better than the Ryan Center. I mean, one of the challenges with the Ryan Center is that obviously athletics is a priority, but we have limitations on dates that we can schedule because we don't know our dates of our basketball games and all of that. It's a very complicated dynamic, but I do feel that Oakview Group is a good partner. And part of bringing this group together, this internal group, is to think about, what does it look like at the next RFP? What's the model for running this into the next era? Because I think it can't continue kind of under the current model.
Yep. Great.
Hey, Abby, there's a little history. When I chaired this committee, I asked Abby, your predecessor, to look at this. And Courtney, when we saw, Ryan, you might have been involved in this. The Ryan Center never made money. Had nothing to do with COVID. I think it's lost money since its inception. And I asked why, because I built an arena. We make 30, and there was not enough events going on. The labor costs were high running it. And Abby Ryder thought she was supposed to come back to us with potential. Now we hit, so I think Courtney, I don't think, at least if I remember correctly, it was never profitable. I asked for looking at it way back when, and a lot of reasons for that. And I think we never completed that loop, and we should do that because it had to do a lot with not enough events. It had to do with labor costs. It had to do with a lot of things, and we should re-examine that because I don't think COVID was the reason why. I don't think COVID's to blame here. I don't.
No, I think you're right. I appreciate that feedback. I think COVID was challenging, but it's not the only reason.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of the challenges I mentioned. And what are the potential future operating models, right? Is there a public-private partnership option? Is there a different way that we're marketing it? I mean, right now, my goal, it's a beautiful facility. We're trying to kind of do the deferred maintenance that needs to be done and think about, what is the next era. I would welcome, board input on that, board participation. I'm happy to come to a future meeting and give you a more detailed briefing on that, if that's of interest. I know it's something that the president and I have been talking about, and he certainly wants the strategy as well from me on that. So happy to keep that conversation going with all of you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, Abby, I think it's time that we're going to talk about going into executive session. I'm going to read the reason why, and that will be the actual motion when I finish. The committee may seek to enter into executive session for the following item: discussion and action related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes, or of the disposition of publicly held property where an advanced public information would be detrimental to the public interest pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42-46(5)(a)(5), and a matter related to the question of the investment of the public funds, which includes any investment plan or matter related thereto, where the premature disclosure would adversely affect the public interest pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42, 46, 5, A7 specifically. Additionally, approval of the authority to complete negotiations of certain financial terms related to the development, construction, and financing of the new university housing and recommendations to the URI Board of Trustees. Do I hear that as a motion?
Joe Formicola, so moved.
Courtney, second.
Okay, thank you both. Any discussion on the motions? All right, all in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Against, say no. Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. The committee will now convene into executive session for the reasons so specified. It is anticipated that the executive session will last approximately, short one, 15 minutes, after which the committee will reconvene in open session. The live stream will be paused during the executive session and will resume once the executive session has ended and the committee reconvene in open session. Further, for all those participating via WebEx, please confirm by saying yes, that no other person is present and or able to hear the discussions at the remote location. Do I hear yes from everyone?
Yes.
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 Okay, yes by me also. Okay, Michelle, let's move us in.
You got it.
Okay. I got my, hold on.
We are now back into discussion.
Michelle, Lynn is not muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. The
Okay.
first order of business in open session is a motion to seal the executive session minutes. May I have that as a motion?
So move, Mike Fascitelli.
All right. Second,
Joe second.
thank you. All in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. What do we got here now? Okay, we got some action items. The first one is the approval of the university's FY 2027 to FY 2031 capital improvement plan and recommendations to the URI Board of Trustees. Abby, do you need to elaborate anything? We've already covered it.
You all have the deck. We went through it in April. The deck that you received with your enclosure just highlights some changes to the CIP. I can just speak to them briefly. From changes from the last time you viewed it in April, one
Yep.
is that we have the final legislature appropriation, so we know what we received in RICAP for campus accessibility and building envelope. We did get some money for both of those projects, but we want to go back and ask for the full amount in this CIP. We also updated the CIP to reflect a recent award to the URI Research Foundation for the project formerly called the Blue Tech Innovation Center. Now we're calling it the Ocean Technology Innovation Center. We had previously had a placeholder on the CIP for that project, and Department of Commerce did just award us $5.7 million. It is important to say that that award actually went to the URI Research Foundation, not to URI, and we're working through the mechanism by which that would be built. So that may come off our SIP in the future, but it's been on the SIP for several years, and still, since we just got the award, we're leaving it on just with a renaming and updated dollar amount. We do have two projects, the NBC Phase 2, Narragansett Bay Campus Phase 2, and also the Biomedical Life Sciences Building, where we had an update with the additional use of gift funds towards the project. So that's been updated. And then finally, we updated the estimate for Allen's Harbor, which is a new CIP project. That's a property that we own where we have our small boats operating because they can't operate on the Bay campus. And we originally thought it would be $5 million to upgrade Allen's Harbor, but it's going to be now, I believe, 6.7. So that's been changed since the last version of the CIP. So everything else is essentially the same as what the board saw in April. Once approved, if you approve it, we will work to submit it to the state of Rhode Island in the next month or so. Happy to
Okay.
answer any questions.
Any further discussion on that issue? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend approval of the University of Rhode Island's capital improvement plan for FY 2027 and FY through FY 2031 as presented. Do I hear that as a motion?
Motion, Mike Fascitelli.
Second, Joe Formicola.
Thank you both. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Say no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, second issue, approval of certain documents relative to the development, construction, and financing of new university housing and recommendations to the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. Abby, need to elaborate anything on that? We just discussed that.
Yeah, so this is essentially authority to execute several key documents for the P3 new university housing project as outlined in your memo and in your enclosures. So these documents will help us execute on the development, construction, and financing of the two new undergraduate dorms and the one graduate student community. There are three for approval. One is a ground lease between the university and Provident, which is the 501c3 that's developing the housing. That is for approval. It's for a term of up to 42 years and contains provisions requiring the project to be constructed in accordance with our campus standards. The second is an affiliation agreement between the university and Provident, which outlines each entity's obligation for the project. And then the third is an interim management agreement between the university and URI DevCo LLC, which is the special entity created by Gilbane to develop the project that allows URI to continue to manage the graduate village once the ground lease has been executed, but until when we have students in there before it's actually torn down. So those are 3 documents for approval. They're close to final, but the vote is actually to allow us to continue final negotiations and execute those documents, because that will have to happen over the next 2 months. There are a few other agreements that have been provided for information. One is a turnkey development agreement that will be between URI DevCo and Provident around what they're providing to the developers in terms of the new buildings, and then a project management agreement between Provident and Inwood Management outlining how the buildings will be managed. So those are just for information purposes, because URI is not a party to those other 2 documents. So
Abby, who are we delegating this story to you or to somebody specific, or? what are
So
we
if you,
del-
no, it's a great question. So this resolution is different than what you're used to seeing. So it's
Right.
actually a series of resolutions outlined in the enclosure. So designating authorized officer, so myself, the president, or the chair of the board, any of those 3 could execute these documents.
It's gotta be one of those 3, it's not just someone else doing it.
Say that again, Mike?
It's gotta be one of you 3 signing off.
Correct. The way that we wanted to have the resolutions that any of those authorized officers
Right.
could sign.
Okay, anything further? Relative to that, may I have a motion to recommend that the board approves the project and authorize each authorized officer to execute development, construction, and financing of the 2 new on-campus undergraduate student housing communities and 1 on-campus graduate student and family housing community at the University of Rhode Island, and to execute documents and take actions, all as further described in the enclosed resolutions as presented in the enclosure. Do I hear that as a motion?
Is Courtney so moved?
Second, Mike Fascitelli.
Okay, thank you both. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Any abstentions? Very good. Motion carries. All right, C, approval of transaction between the University of Rhode Island and the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management relative to the use of the Alton Jones campus and recommendation to the UI Board of Trustees. Okay, Abby, you gotta explain this one.
Thank you. So URI is seeking approval from the board to enter into an agreement with the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management to manage and use portions of the Alton Jones campus. We believe this partnership with RIDEM would allow us to open the campus with increased protection of the natural resources and recreational and education opportunities for the public while preserving our educational and research priorities at URI. As the board knows, we did we issued a request for information back in 2024 seeking information and ideas on potential uses for the Alton Jones campus, which was closed in 2020 amid the pandemic and sort of ongoing financial concerns. We received 7 responses to that LOI, and one of them was the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, who expressed interest in using the property for purposes including administrative functions, educational programming, camps in collaboration with third parties, agricultural activities, veterinary care, and animal rehabilitation. We have been discussing with RIDEM what the role would be at the campus, and we've put forward in the enclosure term sheet that outlines sort of the key provisions of the agreement. Essentially, they would operate and manage the campus. They would invest in critical infrastructure, primarily in buildings, for example, the Environmental Education Center and associated cabins. They would also invest in dam management and utilities infrastructure. And very importantly, they would execute a forest management plan and invest in managing the extensive forest on the campus. RIDEM, as many of you know, is the chief steward of the state's natural resources and is an agency that has substantial experience managing forested land, including land that abuts the Alton Jones campus. So we do feel that partnering with RIDEM will allow us to make sure that we're good stewards of that land, most importantly, open the campus back up to the public in a way for recreational use and educational use, but also reserve the right for us to continue to do research on the campus. We have several research areas that are active that would be excluded from the agreement, and we also intend to reserve the right for future research uses as needed. This would be a 10-year agreement with a 10-year renewal at our sole discretion. The Whispering Pines Conference Center is not included in the agreement that's currently reserved for URI's use or a third-party use. So what we're asking the board to approve is this ability for us to execute an agreement with RIDEM to operate and manage and reopen the Alton Jones campus.
And Abby, what's the pro forma looking, what, if we do this deal, what are we gonna make or lose at Alton Jones going forward?
So essentially, there will be no base rent. They will be investing in infrastructure. We're in a due diligence process with them right now. We've done facility condition assessments on the buildings that they would occupy, but they're doing their own due diligence. So they would invest in capital to improve the facilities. They would invest in some key utilities. For example, we have some challenges with the water on the site. They also they would have a certain time frame to develop a forest management plan that we would approve that would outline the investment in forest management. So I don't have the detailed pro forma at this point because we're still doing a lot of that due diligence, but essentially they would take on the capital investments and expenses of operating the campus. We would not be charging rent because they would be doing that on our behalf.
It would be helpful if we were losing $1 million or $2 million, if we're gonna be even. I think it's, again, I'd like to see numbers on that. As you know, I think this, well, we've seen enough people come to the board. I kind of feel like we gotta make sure we maximize this asset, and I don't have any, how much of the land they're really using, how much is left for us. I think there's a longer term benefit, and how much financially is it costing us and not costing us? We just need numbers, I think, on that.
Yeah, right now, in terms of keeping the campus open, we have one full-time person and it's in the $100,000 to $200,000 range just for operational maintenance, but that does not include forest
Capital.
management, dam management, capital. And again, that's what we're working through with DEM. Now, they had some previously approved funds that they were looking at. So we're happy to share additional information as we have that. What we're hoping to do is have the approval to move forward with the agreement and continue those discussions.
This vote doesn't do the final. You still come back to us. This just allows you to keep going with the negotiation.
We're seeking approval for the transaction with the terms that are outlined in the term sheet.
Do we still have any expenses after this is done?
We still would have some shared expenses. We might have a person out there part-time. Again, we're continue to look through what that would be, but not capital expenses.
And we have the conference center, right? Whatever that is not.
So
right?
that would be excluded from the agreement.
Right. So we have
So
whatever that either.
we did
expenses or
have-
revenues.
We did have one respondent to the RFI potentially interested in the conference center, and those conversations are ongoing but early, but we would come back to the board for that as well. Importantly, they would also take on liability on the campus, which is of significant importance to the university because it is a large facility, a large campus, and we want the public to use it. And DEM is obviously very experienced in this type of access in forested lands. So,
Any other questions, discussions? Okay, this is the motion. To recommend approval of an agreement regarding the use of portions of the W. Alton Jones campus at 401 Victory Highway, West Greenwich, by the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, as presented on substantially the terms in the enclosed term sheets that we have, and that any authorized signatory is defined in the policy on approval and execution of contracts and other binding documents be authorized to negotiate the terms of any documents related to such transactions on substantially the terms in the enclosures, with any such changes and additional terms as are deemed necessary or appropriate by the authorized signatory as presented in the enclosure. Do I have a motion?
This is Courtney, so moved.
We get a second?
Joe Formicola for discussion purposes.
What do you want to discuss, Joe?
Basically, Mike's concerned.
Yeah?
This a little premature.
Well, we went up, did we go out for a couple RFPs on this and we got no takers? Abby?
We did an RFI because it's a lease opportunity, and we received, RIDEM was the only viable respondent for the use of the campus along the lines of what we were anticipating. There were some others that had a smaller use envisioned that I actually believe would partner with RIDEM to execute on that. And then, as I mentioned, we had 2 respondents interested in Whispering Pines, and there were discussions around that.
Mark, you want to weigh in? You're on mute.
Yeah, no, thanks, Armin. I think, look, it's a very important part of our campus. It's obviously we are using it for some research, for some important research. But it's been closed for some time. This is an opportunity to open the campus and have access. But, we're in a period of significant climate change. So management of the forest becomes quite a big deal for us. And obviously we're Rhode Island's university, so partnership with DEM is an important part of that interaction for us. I do know that historically there has been a different way of how it was used. University, in terms of its budgeting, might present that, you can pay for teachers and guides and so forth. But in fact, the operation of the campus was something that the university was absorbing at a loss, and slowly the facilities were degrading out there. So it is going to be, to get it back in a working condition, it's going to take some time. I think it's important. This is also timed over 10 years. It's so that it's not something that's forever, but at some point we have to start to move to take care of the facility that we have out there. And it's not as if we have huge resources. So looking at partnerships is an important piece. So, access for the community, the possibility going forward, certainly for day operations. We want to see our campuses being vibrant. So we certainly want it to be used, the College of Environment and Life Sciences in particular, but obviously we have research going out there through the Department of Chemistry, so that we want to be able to protect as well. So we maybe going back, we've spent quite some time looking at this. We appreciate the history and the use of the facility. We have lots of colleagues that they grew up and they were out there. But yes, it's changing and it's going in a different direction. But that's
Okay, Abby, do
Yeah,
you have
and
any idea how much DEM financially is going to pump into the site?
I'm happy to follow up with additional estimates when we have them. I don't want to give a number right now because that due diligence process is still underway.
Okay, did we come up with the 10 and 10 or they did? on the lease.
That was mutually agreed upon, but a term that I was very comfortable with. And there needs to be a certain amount of time for any partner if they're going to put capital investment in. Right. So that's kind of the minimum if you're going to put that capital investment in. So
Abby, do they think of this as are they gonna charge, this capital getting a return for them, or is it just the money they're getting for benefit for the public?
So they will mostly have administrative functions and educational programming. They may enter into agreements with third-party operators for camps or other educational activities. But no, this would be similar to other RIDEM facilities. It would be a University of Rhode Island facility operated and managed by RIDEM, and it would be open to the public.
Margot,
They're not making money on it.
As a state agency. I can't speak to any sub-agreements that they may enter into. For example, if somebody wants to help them operate a day camp, there may be some revenue that goes into the agency for that, but that I think we would view that as beneficial for the use of the campus.
Mhm.
do they have opportunity to grant money that we would not have for the site?
They have access to state funding, and again, I don't want to speak for DEM, but they have similar access to funding around RICAP and other state funding sources that they would be looking at for administrative buildings in particular, which is what they would like to use the EEC for, the Environmental Education Center.
I think it just should clarify, I've always thought there was a potentially bigger solution to Walton Jones, recognizing the politics and Margot, all these people have come before the board. But I think this is a better deal than doing nothing. I was trying to get to where Mark was, that it wasn't a financial burden on the university. It might actually be a positive cash flow to the university and still accomplish our goals of research and using it and access and all that. I think if you looked at this piece of land, which is an enormous piece of land, and you really were like not caring about the history, you might, that this isn't the highest and best use for this entire piece of land. But I think that it's better than what we got now. what
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
doing
our-
now.
Yeah, I just
bio
want
is
to, I'll just
very-
wait.
Oh.
Sorry, Abby. I think we all, so first of all, we've all been affected by who's come in front of us, and that I think it's the value of the public talking to us, and I think it's caused us to really figure out if there are things that we could do that would satisfy everybody's interests. And I know Abby has looked 25 different ways to figure out is there a way to actually restore the camp, or are to Mike, your point, are there bigger uses for this land? This land is an asset that actually would create a better return stream for the university, or a better use for the university, or could satisfy things that the public is looking for. And frankly, I think we went out a couple times to try to get response on that, and we just really didn't get anything that was satisfactory or was realistic. And this is the most realistic next step. It doesn't preclude, and Abby, tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but it doesn't preclude that in the future we could do something else, because this is a portion of the land. But to Mark's point, if we were to do anything else but this step, we would have a pretty big liability in trying to rebuild the buildings, rebuild, what's there. So it's not just like what is today. You can't even use what is today. We would have to rebuild it. So in the vein of trying to prioritize the university's resources and try to figure out and optimize our land and our assets and our resources and our priorities, it just feels like this is a good solution for now, and it doesn't preclude what we could do in the future. There's a lot of land there, but for right now, this piece is a pretty good answer given all the other priorities that we have, and our need to prioritize resources in lots of places.
So I think what Margot just did was, and others have summed this issue up. By the way, from the day we got on this board, we've been trying to figure out what we can do with the property. There's been no takers. There's no takers out there that's coming up to give us any type of viable proposal. The only question I have, Margot and others, do we want to take a vote on this and recommend as the committee, or give them an opportunity in open session to come to the same conclusion where we are right now?
I mean, Abby, is there any other viable alternative? I think you've showed us everything.
Yeah, at this point, we did make a good effort to get that RFI out pretty widely. We shared it far and wide, and as I mentioned, I think this was the most viable proposal. Also, I do think that we are at a critical point, as the president said, that our infrastructure has been sitting for almost 5 years, and we have lots of priorities on the campus. And so I do think it would be difficult for us to invest in the capital as needed right now to get it to the point where it's still usable. I also want to note that we have heard very clearly from the town of West Greenwich that they are very interested in the campus being reopened. They're very interested in forest management. They're very interested in accessibility and preserving that forest. So I think there's a strong interest for the surrounding community to make sure that we keep with the kind of original intended use of the Alton Jones campus. And I think this agreement would really align with that.
I will say that I work with DAM closely. I know their commitment to this work. I understand and I use their facilities, their hiking trails, their beaches, all of that literally every week. And their commitment to environmental education, their commitment to, I think, aligns perfectly with what we're trying to do here, and aligns with what we've heard from students and from former students and camp members and everyone over the last few years. There are lots of other things we could be doing, granted, but I think alignment with the mission, vision, and values of this organization, I think this is the right move personally, in my opinion. So I move to move us forward.
Yeah. Well said. They are good partners, DEM, all the agencies of the state, to get things done.
I do suggest at some point that Terry Gray come in front of this board and present what they see as the vision for this and where they're moving forward on it. I think I've gotten some of that information from Terry personally and was thrilled to hear some of the plans. So I think it would behoove us to have that opportunity.
I don't want to speak for Terry, but I have no doubt that they would be open to that conversation. We do partner with DEM in many ways as a campus. And so I appreciate you sharing that, Courtney. I feel similarly about the organization. Another thing I want to mention, which we probably mentioned in the past, is that we did have an internal task force led by our former interim provost that really tried to look at what opportunities would be there, what could be best for the campus. And I think really it's preservation of access to the campus for research and education. And I believe that this agreement will preserve access to the campus for research and education and the broader public. So I think the president did mention we've been looking for a while at what the right opportunity is here, but we did actually have a task force kind of look at that. But there hasn't been another alternative that's presented itself. And we're at a critical juncture, in my view.
Anyone else like to discuss the issue? All right, I have a motion on the issue. Do I hear a second?
I think Joe seconded.
Yeah, I seconded it before.
Yep.
Okay,
Well, okay.
thank you.
I'm
By the way,
I'm okay with it.
good, very, very good discussion. All right, all in favor, say yes.
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 No, against, no? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. That was good work, gang, very good. The next one, a little different. I know the document has just been done. Abby, on the approval of the affiliation agreement with the University of Rhode Island Foundation and Alumni Engagement and recommendation to the URI Board of Trustees. Why don't you discuss it a little? Because I understand the document's just been finished and we're all going to get a copy to look at before the board meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we are bringing to the board for approval. We are recommending that the vote be moved to tomorrow to the full board because we just finalized the MOU this morning. But this is a one-year memorandum of agreement between the URI and the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement. As I think we're all really excited to have Mark Antonucci joining us here as the new president or new CEO, excuse me, of the URI Foundation Alumni Engagement and Vice President for Advancement. So we've been working with him to draft an MOU. It's a one-year MOU. It's on substantially the same terms as the last MOU that we entered into with the foundation, although it does reflect the new title of the CEO and Vice President for Advancement. It allows for or states the intent of the university and the URI Foundation to work together on tightening up procedures and policies around gift agreements and disbursements. It also does include a financial and in-kind contributions, which have changed based on prior understanding with the foundation because the campaign has ended. So that's there was an additional amount of funding given to the foundation during the campaign. And so that has been adjusted in the MOU. The full board will get the MOU, and we are hoping that it will be approved. And again, it will give us, it's a one-year MOU, so it will give us time, both URI and the URI Foundation under new leadership to assess the agreement and the relationship and strengthen it and bring back another MOU next year for consideration by the board.
Okay,
And just a comment, Mark and I have been through it really carefully. Having been on the foundation board for a number of years, I think we made, and Mike, you know this, I think we made some good improvements to this MOU that more clearly delineate the relationship. While it's independent, there is a relationship between the president and the board and the foundation and its board. So I think the language is better.
very good. Before and we'll get the copy of it and we'll take it up in open session tomorrow. Okay, before I take the last motion, you know that statement, where is Waldo? All I want to know is where is Fahid? No one answer that. You don't need to answer that. All I know is I got a text at 10:30 last night.
To stick you with, and this wasn't an easy one.
All right. All right. Motion's in order to adjourn. Do I hear that as a motion?
This would be so moved.
Second.
By the way, thank you all. All in favor, say yes.
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 All right, see
Opposed,
you
no.
tomorrow.
No abstentions. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you
Good
all.
job.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.